Welcome to the I Am Pausing podcast. I'm your host, Hannah, sitting down with leaders and experts at the forefront of performance and well-being. Join me for conversations about the science of rest, the cost of burnout, and the truth about real success. Settle in with a cup of tea and let's pause together. In today's episode, I want to share something quite personal, which is that I've been doing EFT tapping with today's guest for quite a long time, and it has touched areas of me which all kinds of other work has not been able to access, and it's been truly transformational. So that is what we're going to dive into today. And I am so excited to have Ros Barber here with us. She is an academic, a writer, and an EFT, emotional freedom technique practitioner. Ros, welcome to the show.
Hi, Hannah. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so pleased to have you here. And I would love to start with a little bit of your story of how you came to EFT. How did you discover it?
Well, it's actually, I keep saying 18 years, but we're nearly 19 years now. So in the summer of 2007, my life was in quite a perilous place. I had 4 kids, including quite a young daughter. She was at that time 3. And my husband had been ill with chronic fatigue syndrome really, he got ill just after she was born. So he'd been ill for some time and couldn't work. And I was doing a PhD in order to try and up my earning potential. And it was really hard going. So I began to feel my mood was just slipping. I began to feel like I was falling into depression, which I'd had when I was younger. I was finding it very difficult to cope with the day-to-day stuff. And around the kids, the family stuff and the PhD and trying to earn a bit of extra money on the side, I was also researching anything I could do. What would help my husband, who was extremely ill? So we tried everything. We'd obviously been to the GP and the GP was useless. They're not very good with chronic fatigue and didn't have any answers for us. And so I'd started registering on sort of various alternative health websites. We had paid a lot of money for all sorts of things like deep lymph massage. We'd had all his metal fillings removed and replaced with white ones, etc. I'd got everything completely organic in the house. We'd had several years of trying to resolve the problem, trying all kinds of therapies. And then I saw, it was a little video about EFT. And it was about somebody who'd actually got multiple sclerosis, was in a wheelchair. I mean, you got to be so careful with this stuff, but he had seen amazing results physically from doing this emotional process. And I have to say, when I first saw it, I have a science background and I thought, well, that looks bonkers. And I just ignored it. A little time passed. A few months later, it came in front of me again at a point where I was really desperate. And I just thought, God, I don't know. I'll try it. Like, I'm desperate enough to try this really weird looking thing. We've tried lots of other weird things, so we might as well. So I downloaded, there were free resources. You could just download this little booklet and learn how to tap, how to use this process. And in the demo, so I was reading the guide and I was in the garden, the sun was beating down and I started getting a headache, and I got a lot of headaches at that time. And I thought, well, I'll try it on this because it says it can work with emotional and physical things. I'll just experiment on myself and I'll try it on this. And the headache disappeared. And I thought, that's very interesting. And coming from this scientific background, my feeling is always, well, if it works, I didn't have any idea how it worked, but if it works, I'll keep investigating. So my plan was to use it with my partner He really wasn't interested at all. He could not be persuaded. But I started to realize it was really helping me cope emotionally with everything that was going on with my very pressured, difficult life. I was juggling all these different things, because the emotions were huge at that time. And my husband was very depressed and very angry and shouting at me a lot as well, because he wasn't very well. And so I was just dealing with all of that. And it felt like all the stuff from the family was coming in through me. I was a sort of the manager of the family, but I wasn't managing terribly well. And I was sinking. So I started tapping every single day and I started learning more and more about it. And as I did, everything started to shift. So people around me, my immediate family, started to notice. I became much calmer. I was much less easy to trigger. I started coping better with the situation around me. And I have to say, within 3 months, I felt transformed just using it every day. My life was transforming around me as well because I wasn't so emotionally reactive. I was able to be very calm and think more clearly, which is terribly important for making good decisions. So I kept going. I thought, I need to know everything about this. This is an incredibly powerful tool. It felt like the thing I'd needed all my life to deal with. I think I was quite an emotional person, quite sensitive person, and emotions had always been a difficult thing for me. I could kick off and get very upset quite quickly. Suddenly I was becoming bulletproof. And I thought, okay, this is great. People were saying things to me that would normally trigger me and upset me, and they literally didn't land. I had people apologize to me saying, "Oh, I'm sorry." And I was thinking, what are you saying sorry for? Oh, they've said that thing. They think that will upset me. Oh, okay. I understand why you're saying sorry. And it was the most extraordinary things. After that initial period, I decided I wanted to know everything about it. And that's when I decided that I would get trained.
Wow, I just think that's so powerful, especially when like other people were noticing a shift in you and your being. What kind of things were they saying? What were they noticing that was different about you?
Well, just being calmer, especially my
Mhm.
kids, it used to be that my boys, who had obviously had much more of me than my young daughter, because they were teenagers at the time. And of course, that's a really hard time having 3 teenage boys who've all got hormonal stuff. They would keep things from me because they would worry that I would explode, like keep that from mum. Mum will kick off.
Mhm.
But I started being really calm. And they started being able to bring things to me, for example, that they hadn't been able to bring to me before. My voice changed, which was a really interesting thing because when you're tense, I had a much sharper voice. It was slightly piercing and difficult to listen to. And my voice changed really quite dramatically in the first year of my tapping because I was calmer, so my throat wasn't so constricted. So I was easier to hear, easier
Yeah.
to listen to. But the main thing was just that lack of triggerability.
Mm.
There was an interesting side issue to that, which was as my family began to feel that I became, instead of emotionally fragile, I became very emotionally unreliable. And they started bringing me their problems. I began at one point to feel like everyone was pouring their problems into me, like I was the drain of the family and all the shit was coming through me. And I thought, well, okay, if it's helping them, I would just tap and clear whatever stuff they were bringing to me, any emotions that it brought up. And the whole house got calmer and more harmonious. It took a little while for it to work with my husband, but eventually he had this thing where he was shouting at me one day and I was staying completely calm because he was unable to trigger me by that point. And of course, it made him angrier and angrier at first because he's the kind of people sometimes want a reaction. They're shouting at you because they want a reaction and makes them feel better. He realized suddenly, he said, every single thing that I throw at you, you respond with love. And it made him realize it. He said, I thought it was you that was making me angry, but now I realize it's me. So it actually took him back to look at his own issues, his own anger issues, and where were they really coming from? Because, of course, he had childhood stuff. We all have. I think most of us, anyway, unless we've had these really idyllic childhoods, most of us have stuff from our childhood that we are then sensitive to those things as adults. Anything that looks a little bit like that or feels like that to our subconscious, that's what a trigger is. So he then, although he wasn't open to tapping, he went and sorted out his own issues with a healing modality that he felt more comfortable with. I think with EFT, for him, it was my thing. So,
There's a couple of things you said there that I just want to pick out because you mentioned about your voice changing. And it was only recently that I listened to a video of myself from about 7 or 8 years ago. Oh my gosh. And I realized my voice has completely changed. And in my yoga classes, people started saying to me, "Oh, I love your voice. It's so calming." And I'd always had this thing growing up of I hate my voice. It's so shrill. And it was because it was up here. My
mm,
whole life, I was like this, and I was talking from my throat, and it was like my whole system, right? And when I started to work on the nervous system, it's when it all started to relax. So I think that's really interesting that you had that too. And then that second point you just made about your husband at the time and the kind of ripple effect that this work has. You were tapping on yourself, but other people start to shift and change as well because we start to change our reactions to them. And that's just like the most powerful thing about all of these things, I believe. Like, I think there's a quote from Ramdas, and he says, we work on ourselves so that we can show up for others or something like that. And yeah, just so amazing. So, for
yeah.
somebody who doesn't know, let's wind back. What exactly is EFT tapping?
Okay. So it's physical, so somatic therapy, but it has a word component. So you speak while you're doing something physical, which is tapping, and you're tapping at various points, which are the ends of the major Chinese meridians. So the same energy meridians that are used in acupuncture. But instead of having to do 5 years of training to be really accurate with your little needles and also have the diagnostics to go, these are the points we need to stick needles in. You don't have to be precise because you're kind of banging. It's kinetic energy. You're roughly getting that area. There's a vibration all the way through the bone in that area, and it will go into that energy channel, if you like. And the other thing about it is you don't have to do diagnostics. So if you had something wrong with your car and you weren't quite sure what it was, you might just send it in for a service. And so you change the plugs, the points, the oil filter, the air filter, and then the problem resolves. And it's like that. So we don't really need to know what the problem is, but we do have to name it to begin with. So you make a statement, an opening statement of what the problem is. You balance it with something that's okay. There is something called the setup statement. So you say, even though I have this problem, I'm okay. There is a full version of that, which is I deeply and completely love and accept myself, which is a statement a lot of people actually find quite triggering. So if you can't say that, we don't go there. We just say, I've worked with children, and they might go, I'm a good kid. If you have a specific skill, you could say, I make really great fairy cakes, whatever it is, but just something that makes you feel good. And that's the balance. But you're trying to go towards acceptance of yourself because we tend to be quite harsh with ourselves when it comes to the problems that we have. So you do the setup statements, tapping on a specific point, which is this one here, which is the karate chop point. It connects to the gut meridian, and the gut is where we sift the nutrition from the shit, the wheat from the chaff, and that's where we give it the problem, which is a combination of nutrition and shit. Essentially, we have the shit is the problem that I have. The setup, the balancing statement is the nutrition. You say something nice about yourself, and then you name the problem and you tap around the points. You start by rating how strong, how emotionally triggering that thing is for you if you say the statement. So you might say, I'm really terrified of running this project. I'm really scared, right? How strong is the fear? 9 out of 10? If 10 out of 10 is I literally am going to scream and run out of the room, and 0 out of 10 is I'm not scared, I'm fine, I'm really confident. You measure that, you just take the number that your subconscious gives you, and that's like your just starting point. Measure, know where we're beginning. And then you move through a series of statements where you bring that down, you bring the fear down, if it's fear we're focusing on, until hopefully it's a zero. And you are literally on that project, you're fearless, you're confident, you know that you can do it. You're clearing out, fear that we bring from our past, from, well, we had that project that went wrong. Or when I was a kid, my teacher shouted at me and told me I was useless. And I'm still carrying that from when I'm 9 years old or whatever it is. It's amazing how much stuff we bring with us, all the baggage we bring from the past into our present reality. So with this tapping process, as extraordinary and mysterious as it might sound, we are able to access our subconscious and reprogram and essentially delete the old programs that are running that make us fearful or angry, or name your negative emotion. And you can essentially reprogram your subconscious until you're not troubled by the things that used to trouble you.
It's so powerful. And for me, I had 5 years of weekly talk therapy. I spent a lot of money showing up to Harley Street in London to a very well-known, psychiatrist, and I completely understood, analyzed and depicted my life so far, my childhood, all of that. And I understood it completely. And some things shifted, and, it was useful to an extent. Do I think that I really needed to be in there every week for 5 years? Probably not. But what was happening when I came to you was I had this understanding, but I was still experiencing this physical anxiety and worry about certain situations. Been to you for a few different situations, a new relationship, and feeling really anxious and uncertain because new relationships in general are uncertain. And I was like, I'm really frustrated with myself because I know logically it's all fine. And then I was beating myself up. I should not feel like this. Why is this happening? This is so pathetic. And it was so powerful. What you're saying is this sort of self-acceptance. And I remember the first time you asked me to say I deeply and completely love myself, I couldn't really, and I did find it really uncomfortable. And then as time went on, I feel like I kind of got there, and you get used to it. And I'm like, yeah, I do. And talk through a little bit, because what I found really powerful was the rating, right? You would always ask me to rate the anxiety at the beginning and the end. And if it wasn't like, nearly completely gone, we'd keep going. So can you talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, so you really want to get it down to a zero, but sometimes you find that there needs to be a bit of processing time afterwards. So I go, when you get it down to a 1 or a 2 within the session, that's probably okay. That might clear, that might be a 0 tomorrow. Or you might get something that comes up underneath it. There might be another issue hiding underneath. And then that one will suddenly become active, if you like, when you've removed the top level of soil. It's a sort of digging down. So then you can use tapping to clear that one as well. The thing is that it's so important for the practitioner to have a sense of how you're progressing through the numbers, right? So if you start and you go, it's a 9, and then we do a cycle of tapping and you go, it's an 8.5, and they go, right, well, we haven't found the door. That's not really a shift, It's like, what's holding that in place? And so I'll do a little bit of investigative work to try and get into the next level, to find the way into a problem. And then you go, you do another round and you go, that's dropped by 3 points. You go, great, now we're cooking. And you really want to get to the bottom of it and dig it right out by the root, like weeds, because if you don't, it kind of grows back again. So you want to get all the way down until it's gone. That one's literally ticked off. You never have to go there again. And you can make a list of all the things that have caused you problems in your life, a little sort of childhood and young adulthood trauma list, and clear the emotional charge on them one by one. And as a result, become a much more peaceful person generally, and more able to stay in your rational self. Now, You made a really good point there about it's like we can understand ourselves through talk therapy, and you can go, "Oh, that's why I'm a mess," you know? And I did that too. And I was in my 20s. Oh, right. Now I understand why I'm a mess. But it doesn't necessarily make you any less of a mess, is the problem. You'll still have, it doesn't unseat the triggers. The triggers are still there. The programs are still running in your subconscious, and they're running silently. But if anything in your current experience reminds your subconscious of this situation. Like, so I would have an example of my dad and mum split up when I was 8, and my dad leaving was really traumatic for me. So I used to have that relationship pattern as I feared abandonment. And anything that reminded me of that, and it could even be, you know, like a colleague at work who seemed to like me and now doesn't seem to like me. You know, it doesn't have to be in a relationship thing, but it's like, oh, they don't, and it's like suddenly your 8-year-old is triggered and you don't have control over that. It doesn't matter how well you logically understand that this is what's happening. Even if you go, yeah, that's because my dad left when I was 8. You're still having the emotional reaction. The program has been triggered and it's running, and it will run to its conclusion, which might be you sobbing in a heap on the floor, or really embarrassing yourself in a meeting, or whatever it might be. But certainly feeling stressed, maybe going back home and opening a bottle of wine, you know, all of these things are, unless we actually go into the foundational memory and you don't remove the memory, because you will still remember it. It just won't be triggering. It just won't have the emotional component. EFT just allows you to take the emotional component out and just sort of heal it and clear it. And now it's like, yeah, I remember that happened, but I'm okay with that. It doesn't make me want to cry anymore. And that's the key. You can't override with your logical mind, your emotional mind. Our emotions, when they are triggered, they are in charge. That's why people talk about red mist descending if your anger is triggered. And it's like a switch. It's so quick. You don't have the ability quite often to pull back. You don't have that moment to pull your emotions back. They are just in charge once they're triggered. And so doing this work is it's actually so sort of securing for you as a person, because you want to get bomb proof. You want to be like, you're one of those police horses that can cope in a riot, you know, things are going off around you, but you're going, I'm all right. I actually know I'm all right. I am safe. These are the feelings that you will automatically have if you've done the work with EFT.
And that's what it was for me. It's, it was creating, as you said, this space between the trigger or the intense emotional feeling and the response, like the reaction, right? And giving myself that space to realize that I am actually safe, and that this feeling that's being triggered is really, really old and similar, similar to what you shared. It was the same for me. It would always be my 6-year-old self. And that's when my parents got divorced, and, there was lots of things going on at that time. And it was showing up in a new relationship, because my emotions were this 6-year-old of, I'm just going to be left, and and I don't want that to happen. So let me cling on as tight as I can, and let me squeeze this and hold on to this, and and that doesn't work, right? And that became a pattern in my life, and
Yeah.
I recognized it as a self-sabotaging behavior and understood it cognitively. But that feeling kept coming, and it was so strong, and as you described, the emotional charge was so high that I couldn't not and do those
Mm.
behaviors that I didn't want to do. And tapping, I was amazed. It was really, I would get very emotional in our sessions, and you would hold that space for me so caringly and so in such a safe way. And then, yeah, what was interesting is you don't need that many sessions, and you would always leave me with a routine that I can then practice at home. And I just had not experienced that before from a modality where in just one session you can go in with this high 9 or 10 anxiety and come out with like a
Yeah.
0 or a 1,
It's
and
amazingly
where it's
powerful, and
yeah.
it can. And sometimes, and not always, sometimes you need multiple sessions. But my feeling as a practitioner, once I started working as a practitioner, is if people were coming back week after week and making no progress, that's failure for me. I literally want them to finish up, you know. I go, this is, if we're not making progress, then this isn't, I'm not satisfied. I don't want you to get dependent on seeing me week after week like a therapist. That isn't what it's about at all. It's about identifying a problem and finding the solution to that. And we're done. And
Mm.
you can do it yourself. You can do it without a practitioner present, you know, and I love to teach people to do it for themselves, because you can do emergency tapping. You know, you have a big emotion come up and you can bring it down really fast. But I've had a situation, it's different people respond differently. Some people are so great to work with. You are really good to work with. I had a friend who came to me, who we were just been chatting on the train, because she had a very serious physical problem where it was a gut related problem, and there was very little that she could eat as a result of this. She'd been in and out of hospital, and it would flare up every so often, always triggered by stress. And at the time when I was chatting to her, she had been signed off work for several months. And I said, we could do a session of tapping if you were open to that. And she said, oh yeah, I definitely would be. She hadn't tried it before, but she was just like, a bit like I was when I discovered tapping. She was sort of, I'm desperate. I'll try anything. I'll try this weird tapping thing that you do. And we cleared that in an hour. She had been sick for years, on and off. And she had been off work for months, and we did an hour together. And she said the symptoms started lessening straight away. They were much milder the next day. 3 days later, they were gone. They haven't come back. She's been back
Mm.
at work for months now. And you go, that's one session. I mean, I love those. I love the one hit wonders. I go, that's when I know I've done a really good job. But it's about the person you're working with as well. She was ready. She was very sort of open. You know,
Mm.
she's a very emotionally open person, and also by nature an extremely positive person. So I would say it's easier when you're not bringing your whole negative history. I came into this with a massive negative history and I had to work through a lot of stuff. But some people, they've had stuff happen to them later. They're actually easier to work with because you're not clearing a massive backlog of childhood trauma.
And we're all different, aren't we? In how we, you said you're more of a science
Yeah.
background, facts and figures. I'm more of a gut and heart and sort of intuitive
Mm.
decision maker in my work. So what would you say to the skeptics out there who are listening to this and who are thinking, I mean, that sounds amazing, but it sounds a bit out there. It sounds a bit woo woo. How would
Yeah.
you, yeah.
It does sound woo-woo, and I completely accept that. I mean, that's what I thought when I came into it. But I did have to remind myself, as someone who, both my parents were physicists. I did originally biochemistry and then biology at university. And I do know that everything is energy, E equals mc squared. We are just very complex arrangements of energy. That's what we are. When you break it down, you go to the atomic level, and then you go to the subatomic level, and you go to the quantum level. We are just very amazingly complex. We seem solid and everything because we're vibrating at a certain level that creates solids. However, with quantum entanglement, some parts of us can be on the other side of the world in a split second. And a lot of weird things, things that really can't be explained in a Newtonian universe can be explained by quantum mechanics. And I would say that EFT, as far as I'm concerned, yes, you can go back and go, we're using these 3,000-year-old energy meridians from Chinese medicine. Or you can say this is actually the future of medicine, where we recognize ourselves as complex arrangements of energy, electricity, essentially. And what we're doing is altering the field. Now we're putting some kinetic energy in there, really sort of, banging, not so hard you bruise, but you're banging things, you're messing about with the electricity in your body. Thoughts, what are they? What do they consist of? What is a thought? Emotions, what are they? They're so instantaneous. We know they're not chemical reactions. We know it's an energetic thing. You have a memory, something's triggered. It's subconscious. You don't even think about it. Suddenly you're angry. Suddenly you're having a whole physiological reaction. And what happened there? It's electricity, if you call it that, or, it's energetic. We know it's on the level of physics because it's so instantaneous. And similarly, that's why this is so quick compared to taking a drug or trying to think your way through things or affirm your way through something where you're really trying to manipulate it from the outside. Let's go into the actual, what we're made of. And we're going to clear, the places where the signals got messed up. In the old days, and I am, getting old, we had TVs where you would, if the signal went and the picture went fuzzy, you'd bang it on the top and that would sort it out. The picture would straighten up. It would go, oh yeah, sorry, I was having a moment. And that's what we're like. We have these kind of like, we've got some emotional static, which is actually an old signal from a broadcast a long, long time ago. And you bang the set-top box and it goes, it's like the energy straightens itself out and you can let this thing go. This thing disappears. It's extremely hard to explain. If you're really skeptical, then you won't try it, or, you'll half-heartedly try it. Maybe you have to be desperate. I was a skeptical, desperate person who went, do you know what? I've tried lots of mad things. Now I'll try this. Why not? What have I got to lose? If you've got a problem that's really nothing else has worked and you really want to sort it out, then give it a proper go and work with someone who knows their stuff as well. Because I have to say, I'm sorry, this is true of a lot of people in alternative health spaces. There are a lot of people, I've tried doing EFT with people who advertise themselves as practitioners and they're not necessarily very good, unfortunately. Because I'm at a certain level, I kind of go, oh no, that's not, no, you don't lead the session. What are you doing? You don't do that. You're trying to impose your solution on me, and that's not how it works. It's always led from the client. The client needs it. You take the client's words. You feel into what it is that they need. As with a lot of alternative health, there are degrees of skill, and people who maybe, same with therapists as well, who haven't necessarily done enough of their own work. You
Well,
really
I
do need
also,
someone who's
yeah.
very clear in themselves,
Well, yeah, I mean, on that point, I feel like your background as like an award-winning writer, your use of language and your also kind of intuition in the sessions as well. I think that's what made it really powerful for me because and then so I do think those things come in. And then on what you were just saying about how it works and that we're all energy, and also what I noticed, and I've studied the nervous system and how that relates to these type of modalities. And what I noticed was as soon as I would start tapping, because you would every session tell me, if we're not tapping within the first 30 seconds of being on the call, we're not doing it right. And that stunned me at first because I'd get on the call and I'd be like, I want to update you on what's been happening and blah, blah, blah. Because I was so used to that therapeutic setting of let's just be in the mind, right? And let me like verbal diarrhea at you, word vomit, and you'd be like, no, let's tap, let's tap. And as soon as I started tapping, I would start breathing more deeply. I would start yawning, and after the sessions, I felt so tired a lot
Mm.
of the time, either really exhausted and needing to rest or um a bit of a lightness. It really depended. And I think that is just the nervous system as well, and working through that.
Yeah, then it really settles, regulates the nervous system straight away. And I love to get people tapping straight away because yes, like you say, we're on our heads. People love to talk and explain, but actually use those words. If you talk to me while you're tapping, you're already doing the work. It's already beginning to process. Some of the emotion will start coming up. That's the other thing about tapping, as you'll have experienced. When you tap, suddenly you're emotional in a way that you maybe weren't. You might say to you, someone says, how are you? And you go, oh, things are really shit right now. But then if you say to me while you're tapping, things are really shit right now, suddenly now you feel it. Now, oh, I'm feeling my emotions now. I've normally got a lid on them, but now I feel them. But that's sort of necessary for them to come up and sort of out and be processed. It's just allow that emotion to express itself, because we squash them. We don't like to, or sometimes don't even have access to our emotions, but we don't like to emote in front of other people very much, and we're all about being in control, being seen to be in control. But of course, what that means is we're bottling stuff up, and it's very bad for us, and it will create physical issues as well as emotional issues. So just starting the tapping, even you can just do this process of tapping even if you don't know what's going on for you, and you can discover it. Because here's for the science people, something that has been measured. If you put one of those little sort of caps that's got lots of electrodes on it on the head of the person who's the client, who's being worked with, and the practitioner, what you see is that both sides get into a different brainwave state. So normally when I'm talking to you now, we're sort of beta brainwave state. Alpha is like reverie, daydreaming, meditation, hypnosis. That's where we go. Or you have delta and theta, which are sort of on the edge of sleep or deep sleep, sort of deeper subconscious levels, where you might do subliminal programming, or you might be dreaming. And when two people tap, all of the brainwave states are all present. They're all present. If you look on the oscilloscope, they're all there. They're all at a certain level. So you're in all these states simultaneously, which is how we access the subconscious, because it's available to us. That's how things come out that you didn't realize you had access to. Memories come up that need processing. That's how I work intuitively with clients, because all my subconscious, my my subconscious and conscious mind are both talking to each other. So I can sort of get the hunch of this is where we need to go, because subconscious is talking to conscious. And the same with you, is that they're connected. And now you have access to things you didn't have access to before. And we can go pretty deep as a result of that.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And so now you've been doing this for many years and work, I think in your words, you've tapped through lots of things from your past, lots of experiences. What's your journey like? How do you use tapping today?
Well, no life is without challenges, is it? And I've got some right now, which is probably the most testing time of my life in some ways, I think, because I was made redundant from my university job coming up for 2 years ago, and sort of thrown back into a freelance life unexpectedly, and having to sort of start again in some ways. I mean, I've always had my writing, but at the same time as I've always had my writing, the publishing industry is in crisis. AI is creating hell. Obviously, universities have been my bread and butter for a long time, and the whole higher education sector is in crisis. So just making a living suddenly at a time when you think I should be kicking back and making it easy. And I was kind of looking forward to, I might be retiring in a few years. Now I'm like, okay, the key thing here is not to be scared, right? So every morning I am getting up and checking in with myself, because I don't want to be acting out of a place of fear, because no one makes good decisions when you're acting out of fear. And it's all about, for me right now, holding my nerve, right? But not in a tight way that's going to make my voice go, but holding steady, like finding my center and my faith that this is all going to work out all right, is very challenging when you look at the actual practical circumstances surrounding me right now. So I'm not without stuff to work on. Now, I will say that I have dealt with so much stuff from my past that past things don't come up very much, but sometimes they still will, and then I'll deal with them, and I almost say, when something comes up from my past, I kind of go, "Oh, thank you. I didn't know. I've got some old crap to work on, and I'm pleased about that, because I want that all done with, really. I think, I've lived long enough. I don't want to keep carrying that stuff. So I'm grateful for that. But really, right now, I'm doing it on managing my mood on a day-to-day basis, making sure that I you know, can face the day in the most positive way that I can to have good results. Because yeah, you don't get good results if you're afraid or you're sinking into depression. Go to bed and pull the duvet over your head. That's just not an option for me. Sink or swim. I think I've got to swim. And if I'm going to swim through this, and I've got to pivot yet again in my life and find new streams of income, which is what I've been up to. I need to be emotionally stable for that to work. So I tap every day. It's part of my morning routine. It's literally the first thing I do once I've had coffee.
Yeah, and that's incredible, isn't it? Because you don't need anything. You just need yourself, your your body.
Yeah.
And we do. We live in a world that is full of fear. Our lives are very busy. Most of us are quite stressed a lot of the time.
And look
So
at world events as well. I mean, I try not to
yeah.
because I know how much that can derail a person. If you spend too much time on social media or looking on the news, you'll be living in fear and it'll be quite hard to function. You'll end up in a state of paralysis. But outside events do impact on us. And so that's something else that I might, if I've become aware of something that I'm not very happy about that's going on in the world, might be really angry about something that's going on, I'll clear that too. Because anger is quite an empowering emotion. It is quite empowering in some ways. It's better than feeling despair to get angry about things, but it's not the energy I want to carry into my day. I would rather be fired up and take the energetic part of that isn't destructive, that isn't, I want someone's head on a platter. So I'll clear anger, I'll clear fear, I'll clear doubts, I'll clear anything that looks like it's not helpful to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's incredible because it's so simple in a way, repeating statements and affirming, okay, I am able to move myself through this is self-empowerment,
Mm.
right? And that's kind of what we need because we can't control much else in this world other than how we react.
Yeah, it's one of the things I really love about EFT is that it doesn't require that you book a session with a therapist. It doesn't cost you any money, once you've learned it. And it does help to really learn it well. I mean, I got much more out of it once I understood the subtleties. If you're only doing the absolute basics, you won't get as much out of it as you will if you understand. There are sort of sub techniques. There are things to do when you hit a bit of a brick wall with yourself, you're not quite sure how to progress. And there are all these little techniques within the technique to help you navigate those problems. There are phrases that I find uh, amazingly useful that I picked up along the way, just reading other people's accounts of the tapping that they were doing. There used to be a really good newsletter from the guy who invented it, and he'd put it out every week. And it was a lot of people using the technique with clients and discussing what they were using. And so I picked up a lot from that. One of those things is if you're going to give a presentation, say, and I've given quite a few of those, and you're nervous about it, you'll start off by doing the tapping to clear the nerves. So I'm really nervous, and what if they laugh at me, or what if I'm rubbish, or what if I forget my words, or whatever it might be, whatever your specific fears are within that, and you deal with them all one by one. But I like to come round to this positive statement I use with myself and I've used with clients at all, which is I choose to be, even though I'm still a bit nervous about this presentation, now it's at a 2 or a 3, I choose to be surprisingly calm and relaxed. And then you go around the point, surprisingly calm. I choose to be, and you think it would be surprising. It would be really surprising if I did my first book launch with Will Self, but I was terrified of that guy. Will Self is a terrifying personality. He's intimidating, he's intellectually intimidating. And I thought, I really can't go there being terrified of the person I'm sharing a stage with. So I did this. That was the first time I used surprisingly calm and relaxed. And I was surprisingly calm and relaxed on the stage with Will Self, and everything was lovely. But, things like that, just learning all the subtleties of the technique is really, really helpful if you're working on your own. But it's so powerful. And the fact that you can just do it on your own without anyone else being involved and without it costing you a penny. That's real empowerment.
And especially like, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what your life circumstances are, what you've been through, what you're going through. There's not really any requirements other than being open and, you know, wanting a different experience,
Yeah, willing
right?
to change how you feel about something. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes if something's really stuck, I go, how am I actually invested in, like, say I'm really, really angry with somebody and I can't seem to bring the anger down. It's really worth going, do I like being angry with them? What am I getting out of that? That's so that, and then then you shift your tapping statement so that even though I really like being angry with them, I choose to love and accept myself anyway. And then you can clear, and then you go, you'll actually let that go. That thing that you were hanging on to, that as soon as you find that little nugget where this is the reason why I'm invested in my problem, you can then let the problem go. So there
Mm,
are lots of techniques that you can use within it to sort of bounce. I like one of the ones where I go, people are in conflict over something. I will alternate the two statements when I work with them. So they'll go, yeah, I really hate doing this, but I really love that. And I really hate this, and I love that, but I hate this, and I love that. And it just sort of undoes it. You end up laughing usually. And then you go, no, I'm really neutral. I'm properly neutral about it at last.
because we can get quite attached to an identity of
Mm,
ourselves, can't we? Like, I know I got for years. When I lived in America and I went to the doctor and I told them that, my hormones were all over the place, I kind of went in expecting them to prescribe me some sort of hormonal birth control or something to help me out. And I walked out of that doctor's office with a prescription for Xanax, which is an anti-anxiety medication which you can't even get legally in the UK. And for all those years that I was medicating myself daily with Xanax, I was ingraining in my identity that I'm an anxious person and this is me. And I got really attached to that identity and I need this drug to make me feel better. And it was only when I moved back to the UK and I couldn't get the drug anymore. And then I had to feel the feelings and
mm.
work through them and realize that that's a choice. It's a
It's
choice to be attached to that identity of being anxious. I
We
can
don't
believe
realize
that
we're
I'm
doing
not.
it. We don't realize we're doing it to ourselves. We make these I am statements, and your podcast is called I am pausing. I am statements are the most powerful statements that we have. They are identity statements, and you have to be quite careful. You have to notice when you're using them. So if you say, I am an anxious person, you've made that your identity. Whereas in fact, what the truth of it is that you're an anxious, you are feeling anxious. You are a person who's feeling anxious. It's a feeling. It might be a common feeling. It might be a regular feeling. You might feel like you're in it all the time. So you might say, I'm an insecure person. I'm really insecure. And you're using that to describe who you are. It's not the truth about you. It's not a fact. Nobody's born insecure. Nobody's born anxious. Babies are born just fine, right? Until they start experiencing life, parents, siblings, school, all of this stuff starts to shape us. But with this technique, we can kind of reshape ourselves in the shapes that we really want to be, almost like the shape that we might have been had we not taken all the damage out of the way, and clear all that stuff and realize, no, I'm just me. And I sometimes have this emotion and this emotion and this emotion. They're not my identity, you know? If
Yeah,
you've made it your identity, it's really hard to shift it. So you
exactly.
have to clear
Yeah.
that, get underneath that.
Yeah. For me, it was shifting from I am an anxious person to I am a person who at times experiences anxiety. Right.
Exactly.
And then that shift, even those experiences of anxiety became less and less intense. And yeah, so I think that's also one of the powers of this work is it's not a coincidence that my podcast and my business is called am pausing because, yeah, I mean, there's a whole story we don't need to go into behind that, but it is to do with how powerful it is, whatever we say after I am. Um, so, Ros, I just think the work that you do is so powerful, and if anyone listening is interested, I highly recommend, we'll put it in the notes of the episode, that you check out your Substack, because Ros is just such an incredible writer, and I'm always captivated by what you write. The vulnerability, the courage, the stories that you share are so amazing. Yeah, truly. Personally, from me, because selfishly, I'm really grateful for the work you do because it has helped me in my life. But I also think it's just really important for society at large. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. We're here to be useful. I think that very much. And I think all the times where I felt like I was a broken person, I was a drain on society and the drain on the people around me. And now I'm in payback mode. It's like I'm really here to be of assistance and to serve people, humanity. Is that too large? I hope that my words make a difference to people. I hope that introducing people to EFT makes a really palpable difference in people's lives. I'm here to help people navigate what is a really interesting time to be alive.
And I can really feel that energy from you in your work and in your writing as well. Reading some of your pieces, I feel like, wow, yeah, there's things that, maybe other people would be too afraid to share, and you share and you go there, and it makes others feel seen and feel like we're not alone in these feelings or experiences that we're having. So yeah, again, thank you.
It's a pleasure.
We do have a closing tradition on this podcast, which is a question. And the question is, if there was one message about well-being that you could put on a billboard for everyone in every workplace to see, what would it say?
How about this? When your negative emotions are running the show, you're not.
When your negative emotions are running the show, you're not. I love it.
Just that feeling like, your triggered 8-year-old is driving the bus. It's not good. You're acting out of anger, or you're acting out of fear, or you're acting out of anxiety or doubt or insecurity or any of these things. You're not really in control because your emotions completely take over our ability to be rational, logical, make sensible decisions. And it's not really how we want our lives to roll, I don't think, if we can do something about it. I think for years, I couldn't do anything about it. When I discovered EFT, I was so relieved. I finally had something that, would empower me I could be in charge of my life instead of my emotions running my life.
Yeah, it's so great. Thank you so much, Ros. This has been an incredible conversation. And yeah, I will share all of your details. So if people are interested in working with you, that they can find you easily.
All right. Thanks so much, Hannah. Thank you for having me on. It's been lovely.
Thank you.